Almost everyone says something after a loved one dies, not because they know what to say, but because silence feels unbearable. In that moment, words seem safer than quiet, and speaking feels like the only way to survive the weight of loss. Padre Pio warned that this moment matters more than most people realize. He often reminded the faithful that after death, the soul no longer needs human phrases, explanations, or repeated words. What the soul needs is prayer, trust, and complete surrender to God. This video is not here to judge, frighten, or make anyone question their intentions. It is here to bring clarity to a moment where pain often creates confusion, and to help you understand what truly helps a soul after death. And if you have ever lost someone you love, you may have asked yourself this quietly, perhaps long after the moment passed. Did what I said truly help them? Or was the soul asking for something different? When someone we love dies, silence becomes heavy. It is not a peaceful silence at first. It feels awkward, uncomfortable, almost unbearable. We stand beside a body that once spoke, laughed, answered us, and suddenly there is nothing coming back, so we speak. We speak not because we know what to say, but because we are afraid of saying nothing. Words become a way to protect ourselves from the weight of loss. They help us breathe, help us cope, help us feel that we are still connected. Most of the phrases spoken after death are not chosen carefully. They rise automatically from memory, from culture, from what we have heard at other funerals, from what people around us are saying. In moments like these, few people stop to ask whether the words are meaningful. They only want them to sound kind, and this is very human. Speaking after death is often less about the soul that has departed and more about the pain of those who remain. Words soothe the living heart. They give structure to grief. They prevent us from feeling alone in silence. But Padre Pio gently reminded that moments involving death ask for something deeper than instinct. They ask for discernment. Understanding why we speak is important. Not to condemn ourselves, but to recognize that not every impulse born from pain is spiritually helpful. Silence, though uncomfortable, can be more honest, and prayer, even when quiet and imperfect, reaches where words cannot. Before asking what we say after death, we must first understand why we feel the need to say anything at all. After a death, most people do not invent new words. They repeat familiar ones. These phrases are learned slowly over years. We hear them at funerals, wakes, hospital rooms, and family gatherings. They are passed from one generation to another, often without reflection. In moments of loss, they surface automatically, almost as a reflex. Many of these expressions are meant to be comforting. They sound respectful. They sound loving. And because everyone says them, they feel safe. There is reassurance in repeating what others have already spoken before us. But familiarity does not always mean discernment. When someone dies, very few people pause to ask whether a phrase comes from faith or simply from habit. The words are spoken quickly, sometimes nervously, sometimes with tears, sometimes in whispers. They fill the silence, but they are rarely examined. This is not a failure of intention, it is a result of confusion. In moments of grief, the heart seeks relief. Words become tools to manage pain, not instruments of spiritual help. They organize emotions, create a sense of order, and allow the living to express love, but their spiritual effect is often overlooked. Padre Pio never criticized people for speaking out of sorrow. What concerned him was how easily habit replaces prayer. When phrases become automatic, they can take the place of silence, reflection, and true intercession. Understanding this helps us see that the issue is not about bad words or good words, but about whether our response to death is guided by faith or by repetition. Before judging what we say, we must recognize how deeply habit shapes our speech, especially when the heart is wounded. And this is why Padre Pio warned, because habit can quietly replace prayer. Padre Pio did not speak about death from a distance. He lived close to it. Throughout his life, many people turned to him after losing someone they loved. Others spoke to him about what they said, what they felt, and what they did in those first moments after death. And Padre Pio, with great sensitivity, noticed something that most people never question. He observed that death often awakens two opposite movements in the human heart. One is faith, the desire to entrust the soul to God. The other is fear, the need to fill the silence with words. Padre Pio saw how easily fear takes the lead. He noticed that many people spoke quickly after death, not because they had something meaningful to say, but because silence felt too heavy. Words became a shield against pain. They softened grief for those who remained, but they did not necessarily help the soul that had departed. What concerned Padre Pio was not the emotion behind these words, but the confusion of roles. He believed that after death, the living are no longer called to speak to the dead, but to pray for them. According to testimonies from those close to him, Padre Pio often redirected people away from phrases and toward prayer. He gently reminded them that the soul's journey continues beyond human hearing, and that prayer reaches further than any spoken sentence. For Padre Pio, death was not a moment for explanation, conversation, or reassurance through words. It was a moment for trust, reverence, and intercession, and this raises a quiet but important question, one worth reflecting on together. Have you ever noticed how often words come first in moments of loss, and prayer comes later? Many people believe that words spoken after death somehow reach the person who has died. They imagine the soul listening, understanding, or being comforted by familiar phrases. This belief is natural, because it comes from love. But Padre Pio gently challenged this idea. According to Catholic spirituality, after death, the soul enters a different reality. It no longer relates to the world through human senses. It does not hear sounds the way we do, nor does it need explanations, reassurance, or conversation. What the soul needs is not communication, but intercession. Padre Pio reminded the faithful that words are designed for the living. They help us express pain, love, and grief. They organize emotions and give structure to loss. In this sense, words serve an important human purpose. But spiritually, they stop where prayer begins. Prayer does not depend on sound or language. It is directed to God, not to the soul itself. And God alone knows the state of that soul, its needs and its path. This is why prayer reaches further than any phrase spoken aloud. Padre Pio saw that when people rely too much on words, they sometimes delay or replace prayer. They feel they have done something simply by speaking, without realizing that the most powerful act remains undone. This does not mean that words are sinful or wrong. It means they are limited. They comfort hearts on earth, but they do not move what belongs to heaven. Understanding this difference helps bring peace. It shifts the focus away from what we said or failed to say and toward what truly matters, placing the soul in God's hands through prayer and trust. After a death, words often serve an important purpose. They comfort those who remain. They help family members breathe through grief, express love, and feel connected to one another. In moments of loss, speaking can bring warmth and human closeness. Padre Pio understood this very well. He never denied the emotional value of words. He knew that the living need consolation and that speaking can soften pain. But he also warned that what comforts the living does not always help the soul. This is where confusion often begins. Many people believe that because words feel comforting, they must also be spiritually effective. But Padre Pio gently reminded that these are two different realities. Emotional relief happens in the human heart. Spiritual help happens through God. When we speak after death, our words usually move inward, not upward. They help us process loss. They ease the shock. They bring temporary peace to those still on earth, and there is nothing wrong with that. The problem arises when words take the place of prayer. Padre Pio never wanted people to feel guilty for speaking. His concern was only that prayer would not be forgotten. Padre Pio observed that people sometimes leave moments of death feeling they have done enough because they spoke with love. Without realizing it, prayer is postponed, shortened, or forgotten altogether. This is not because people do not care, it is because grief is confusing. Understanding this distinction frees the heart from guilt. It helps us recognize that words and prayer have different roles. One comforts us, the other helps the soul. And when we understand this clearly, we can allow words to remain human, while letting prayer become our true act of love for those who have passed. Silence after death is often misunderstood. Many people see it as emptiness, distance, or even coldness. That is why it feels uncomfortable. We fear that silence means doing nothing, but Padre Pio taught something very different. For him, silence was not absence, it was reverence. After death, silence creates space. It allows the heart to stop reacting and start trusting. It reminds us that the soul has entered a mystery that words cannot explain or control. Padre Pio believed that silence protects the soul from being pulled back into human emotion. When we speak too much, we often remain focused on our pain, our memories, our attachment. Silence, on the other hand, gently shifts attention away from ourselves and toward God. This kind of silence is not empty, it is attentive, it is prayerful, it is full of intention. In silence, the living acknowledge that they no longer command the situation. They surrender the soul to God's care. This surrender, according to Padre Pio, is one of the greatest acts of love. Silence also prepares the heart for true prayer. When words stop flowing outward, prayer begins to rise inward. And prayer, unlike speech, does not depend on explanation. It depends on trust. Padre Pio often encouraged people not to rush death with noise, not to fill the moment with phrases, but to allow silence to become a bridge between grief and faith. Understanding the spiritual value of silence helps us see it not as something to fear, but as a quiet form of intercession, one that speaks directly to God, even without a single word. After understanding the limits of words and the value of silence, a natural question arises. If words are not enough, what truly helps a soul after death? Padre Pio was very clear about this. What helps the soul is prayer. Simple, sincere, and trusting prayer. Not perfectly formed phrases, not long explanations, but prayer offered with faith. Prayer places the soul directly in God's presence, where mercy, justice, and love meet. Padre Pio encouraged people to pray even when they felt unsure. He believed that a humble prayer spoken with love reaches further than any eloquent speech. The soul does not need to hear our voices. God hears them. He also emphasized the value of offering masses for the dead. The Mass, according to Catholic faith, is the highest form of prayer because it unites the sacrifice of Christ with the intention offered for the soul. Padre Pio celebrated countless Masses with this intention, knowing their spiritual power. Small acts of faith also matter. A simple prayer said quietly, a moment of silence offered to God, a sincere act of trust. These gestures may seem invisible, but spiritually they are powerful. Padre Pio taught that helping a soul is not about doing many things. It is about doing the right thing, entrusting that soul fully to God. This understanding brings peace. It reminds us that we are not helpless after death. Even when words fall short, prayer remains. And through prayer, love continues to act, even beyond this life. One of the most common fears people carry after losing someone is this: did I do it wrong? And right behind it comes another, even heavier question: is it too late now? Padre Pio offered a very comforting answer. According to his spiritual guidance, it is never too late to help a soul. Love does not stop at the moment of death, and prayer is not limited by time. Even if words were spoken out of habit, confusion, or pain, prayer can still be offered with intention and humility. Padre Pio reminded people not to look backward with guilt, but forward with faith. What matters most is not what was said in the first moments of loss, but what is done afterward. A soul continues its journey, and prayer continues to accompany it. A quiet prayer offered days, months, or even years later still has value. A Mass offered with sincere intention still reaches God. Silence lived with trust still becomes an act of love. Understanding this removes fear. It shifts the focus from regret to responsibility, not a heavy responsibility, but a hopeful one. We are not asked to be perfect in moments of grief. We are asked to be faithful afterward. And this invites a very personal reflection. Have you ever found yourself wondering, after some time had passed, whether there was still something you could do for someone you lost? Padre Pio was not a man of complicated instructions. When it came to death and the soul, his advice was often very simple. He encouraged people to replace anxiety with trust. Instead of searching for the right words, he guided them toward the right intention. Instead of speaking to the dead, he taught them to speak to God. His counsel can be summarized in a quiet attitude. Pray, entrust, and let go. Padre Pio believed that the soul's journey is ultimately in God's hands. No human phrase can control it, and no human explanation can guide it. What can help is surrender. Surrender expressed through prayer. He also warned against turning grief into restlessness. Excessive speaking, excessive questioning, and constant revisiting of what was said can keep the heart unsettled. Prayer, on the other hand, brings peace because it accepts that God knows more than we do. This advice is not demanding. It does not ask for great knowledge. It does not require special words. It simply asks for faith. Padre Pio wanted people to understand that helping a soul is not about effort, but about confidence in God's mercy. When prayer replaces worry and silence replaces fear, the heart begins to rest. And in that rest, love continues, quietly but powerfully. At the end of this reflection, one truth becomes clear. Words have their place, but they are not the center. After death, love expresses itself best not through phrases, but through prayer and trust. This does not mean we become cold or distant. It means we allow our love to mature, to move from human expression to spiritual intercession. Padre Pio taught that when words fall silent, something deeper begins. The heart stops trying to explain and starts trusting. The soul is no longer held by emotion, but offered to God. This is where peace enters. Instead of replaying what was said, we learn to offer what truly matters. Instead of fearing mistakes, we learn to act with faith. And instead of filling silence with sound, we allow silence to become prayer. In this way, grief is not erased but transformed. It becomes a path of love that continues beyond death. Padre Pio did not leave people with fear. He left them with direction, less speaking, more prayer, more trust. And through this simple movement, love remains active, even when words no longer serve their purpose. When Padre Pio spoke about death, he never did so to confuse, frighten, or burden hearts. His intention was always to bring clarity where pain creates confusion, and that is exactly what this reflection is meant to do. After death, the soul no longer depends on our words, our explanations, or the phrases we repeat out of habit. Those words often serve an important purpose for the living, helping us endure loss and express love. But spiritually, Padre Pio reminded the faithful that the soul's true help comes from a different place. What truly reaches beyond this life is prayer offered with trust. It is the act of placing the soul entirely in God's hands without trying to control, explain, or hold on. This is why Padre Pio never wanted people to feel guilty for what they said in moments of grief. His concern was never about correcting speech, but about ensuring that prayer would not be forgotten. If words were spoken, let them remain where they belong, in the human heart. What matters now is what continues. Prayer offered quietly, trust renewed daily, and a willingness to let God do what only God can do. Death does not end love. It asks love to mature, to move from speaking to entrusting, from anxiety to faith, from fear to surrender. This is the path Padre Pio pointed to. Not a path of silence without meaning, but a silence filled with prayer. Not the absence of love, but its deepest expression. And when love reaches that place, it no longer needs words to be real. God bless you.